Story 1. No. I think it should be banned in the classroom for students 18 years old and younger. I am fine with their use in the hallways. In the classroom, I cannot conceive of any reasonable argument that would not be widely abused and would ultimately make the learning experience notably worse. Story 2. Genuine question. Why would a student need them during school? I went to high school when they were not allowed out of our lockers during class. What changed to make that policy different? Story 3. I like how, in the Korean dramas I watch, students place their phones on a wall when they enter the classroom, using one of those hanging shoe organizers, or they put them in a box. We should use something like that so the phones are not a distraction but remain available between classes or for the weekly school shooting. Story 4. Children younger than 12 should not have phones. Story 5. Yes, and it should have been done a long time ago. Cell phones are nothing but a distraction in the classroom. Story 6. I am a school board member. When I proposed a ban on personal phones, other board members reacted as if I had advocated physical punishment. They asked what if there is an emergency. I said we do not need 300 students calling 911. Staff have phones, and not everyone would be without access. They opposed me from every angle, despite studies showing how detrimental phone use is. They argued that if students cannot reach their phones 24/7, they might die. Story 7. Absolutely. You are in school to learn, and you cannot do that if you are using your phone. Story 8. Phones should not be allowed in kindergarten through 12th grade at all. Someone brought a rifle to my high school in 2018. That ordeal made me realize that having my phone on me did not and would not solve anything. Some students use that as an excuse to keep their phones. They ask, what if something happens? The answer is not in your phone. Story 9. When I was in high school, the rule was that you could have it, but it had to be put away. I want my child to carry a phone. Not having phones just makes it easier for school administrators to cover up and downplay things like violence, shootings, and sexual abuse. Story 10. I graduated just as smartphones were becoming popular around 2010 and 2011, so not many students at my school had them. Most used regular flip phones. Even with only texting available, those with mobile phones often used them during class instead of learning. iPod Touch devices were an even bigger distraction. I cannot imagine most children having access to the internet and addictive social media apps now and not using them at every opportunity. These are the people who will grow up and complain that school did not teach practical topics such as how to do taxes, the Civil War, interest, or mortgages, without realizing that school did teach those things and they simply were not paying attention. However, the world is different now than it was 15 years ago. Someone who graduated in 1995 might argue that children do not need constant access to Google or the internet because they learned by looking things up in a dictionary, encyclopedia, or the library. In my opinion, it would be unreasonable to deny access to the new tools that scientific progress has made available simply because previous generations managed without them. Ideally, parents should set limits. If a child is in school from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., configure the phone so it cannot access Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok during those hours and functions only as a music player. During lunch, study halls, and other downtime, children can listen to music but should not have unfettered access to the internet and the troubling levels of cyberbullying and related mental health problems. That requires parental involvement, which is increasingly harder to find. Story 11. In class, yes. During breaks, no. Learning is better without constant pings, but total bans ignore emergencies and real-world technology. Create classrooms without phones and provide lockers or pouches. Allow students to use phones at lunch and teach digital etiquette alongside the rule. Story 12. Yes, they are a distraction, unnecessary, and should apply to all grade levels. Story 13. If someone needs to contact a child during the school day, they should speak with school staff rather than with the child. Children should not have responsibilities beyond learning. Story 14. Cell phones should be banned in classrooms. They are a serious distraction, especially for the younger generation. Story 15. Phones are not needed at school. If parents need to contact their child, they should call the school office. In an emergency involving a child, the school office will contact the parents. Story 16. Having a cell phone visible at any point during the day would have resulted in it being confiscated when I was in school. I don't know why that changed, but we should absolutely return to that practice. Story 17. My county has just banned the use of mobile phones by students. I could not be happier. Story 18. No age limit or ban. If you are in a classroom, please stop the disruptive behavior and pay attention. Story 19. Yes, there is too much temptation to be distracted. You are there to focus on schoolwork, not on text messages and social media. Story 20. Absolutely. There is no reason to have them in the classroom. It sounds like a good argument for lockers. Story 21. Yes. Nowhere on my child's school supply list is a cell phone. Story 22. Cell phones are generally a distraction in the classroom. I cannot recall a time when I was substituting in high school that they were used positively. During some tests, students were allowed to listen to music through earbuds. That is neutral, not truly positive or truly disruptive. In the classroom, students should learn to use their minds to solve problems, not their phones. Learn to read, do math, memorize information, and think critically. In higher-level classes, technology can assist, but it should be a tool, not the one doing the thinking. Master the basics and develop your skills. Then use technology to work better and faster. If technology fails, you still have your skills and knowledge to fall back on. I would like to see a test announced as allowing cell phone use, but on test day phones would be placed in a Faraday cage that renders them unusable. That would reveal who studied and who relied on the internet. Story 23. I would go further and ban handheld smart devices for people under 18 entirely. They can still have personal computers and possibly tablets. Wireless internet access only, exclusively for digital literacy. Widespread dopamine-driven addiction to short-form media is very harmful to society. Literacy is declining. Students are progressing through education with minimal learning because schools are defunded due to poor performance, and the achievement gap widens each year. They are highly susceptible to propaganda, scams, and predators. They post their thoughts on accounts centralized by Google, Meta, or X, formerly Twitter, with little regard for their digital footprint and data profile. The idea is not to ban them from all online spaces, but to remove phones from their hands so they can reconnect with the physical world. Establishing a barrier between digital and physical life by requiring use of a desktop personal computer would reduce the majority of problematic engagement. Feels strange to say this. I grew up during the information revolution, but whenever I see younger members of Generation Z and adolescents, there is rarely a moment when they are unplugged. It seems they are completely dissociating from reality. Postscript. This would also, theoretically, reduce calls for adult content age verification. Home personal computers are much easier to moderate than a teenager's smartphone, and as long as you do not give an adolescent both a laptop and an unsupervised private space, underage visits to adult websites would plummet. I am aware that keeping teenagers out of adult websites is often used as a pretext for extensive surveillance, but removing that rhetoric could help preserve online anonymity. Story 24. Are they there to use their phones or to learn in class? Story 25. I agree with a minimum age of 12 years. It may not need a complete ban for safety reasons, but they should not be allowed to be out. Story 26. It should be for everyone, including teachers. They are not in school that long. Sadly, cell phones are taking over our lives. Story 27. 18 years old or younger. The results are absolutely night and day. Story 28. I work in a high school in a state with a total cell phone ban. It is fantastic. I would support the same nationally. Students pay more attention and there is much less moment-to-moment drama. Story 29. Don't ban technology. Ban the distraction. For children under 12. Personal phones should be switched off and kept in a locker or pouch. School devices should be used only when the lesson requires them. Parents should contact the school office, not the child. This preserves focus without pretending the internet does not exist. Story 30. It is crazy to me that this is even an issue. When I was in school, if we were caught with phones out, even in the hallways, they were taken to the front office and our parents had to pay $15 to get them back. We went through metal detectors and had our bags checked every morning. Kids do not need cell phone access during class time. At lunch or in the hallways between classes, who cares? Story 31. The butchered title of this post indicates why we should ban cell phones and gadgets in the classroom. If the reader must decipher what you wrote, you made a mistake. Story 32. They should be banned from schools during school hours. There is no reason for them to be on. If there is a family emergency, the school can be contacted to have the student released. They are a distraction. Story 33. During my freshman year, my school did not have a cell phone ban, and I received poor grades because I did not care about classes. From my sophomore year onward, the school implemented a cell phone ban, and my grades improved. Cell phone bans work. Story 34. Ban smartphones in classrooms. Flip phones are allowed if parents are genuinely concerned about contacting their child in an emergency. Story 35. Cell phones should be banned throughout high school. Story 36. An uneducated base is exactly the type of demographic the Make America Great Again movement is looking for. Story 37. I agree with banning all phones because they are a distraction. Many people will say, but what if there is an emergency? When I was a kid, we had to go to the office to call our parents to pick us up. Story 38. In Quebec, cell phones are banned in primary and secondary schools. Even some people who strongly opposed the ban have changed their minds because the results have been very positive. Story 39. Absolutely ban them. There was an article in recent years explaining that many young people enter the workplace unable to use laptops and personal computers to an acceptable degree. The issue is that many have become used to cell phones and tablets unless they are, say, gamers, but those devices are not up to the job of most office work. There needs to be a space where they learn skills beyond what they learn at home. That means setting aside the technology they are already proficient with and relying only on technologies they are not for several hours a day. Story 40. Cell phones are not useful in classrooms and are rarely used for studying. They distract students, contribute to emotional dysregulation, and give bullies a silent tool to harass and humiliate other students without alerting school staff. Story 41. All the schools my children attend do not allow students to have devices in class. When one of my children was in junior high, staff would confiscate a phone for the day if it was seen being used in the building. Story 42. I do not think cell phones should be allowed in the classroom. In the hallway and at lunch, that is fine with me, but while you are in the classroom, you should not have your phone. We do not sit around with our phones out at work, presumably. Story 43. To an extent, yes. Keep phones in backpacks on silent and allow students to use them during lunch and study hall, but not during instruction. Given school shootings and similar incidents, I would want a mobile phone available to my child in case something happens. Story 44. My kid's school, where my wife also works, has banned cell phones school-wide for kindergarten through 12th grade. Teachers and aides are not supposed to have them, although that is not strictly enforced. They may have phones but are not supposed to use them during classes. Students are not allowed to have them at all. I graduated in 2001 from the same school. We actually had a payphone that we had to use to call our parents if needed. No one had a cell phone back then. If anyone did, it was strictly for calling and texting because smartphones were not yet common. Story 45. Emergency situations only. Other than that, no. It is a distraction from the work, and if you are not doing the work, you are not going to make it. I say this as I play on my phone at work. Distracted. Story 46. As someone in their early 30s, it is insane that this is even a discussion. Children should not use cell phones during class. Story 47. I was in middle school when camera phones became commonplace, and confiscating a phone for having a camera was rarely questioned. By the time I graduated high school, everyone had a touchscreen phone connected to a wireless network. Schools began blocking social media on the school wireless network to reduce distractions. Today, students participate in trends on TikTok and Instagram in class and upload them using their own fifth-generation cellular networks with no repercussions. While educational outcomes have declined nationwide, many parents my age still insist their children must have their phones at all times. I understand the safety concerns given how unsafe the world can be, but millions of children before me walked to school every day for years without any phone. We should not encourage the next generation to become hyper-dependent on phones just because we are. Story 48. No one in high school should use a phone during class. There is no reason for students to text, play games, or watch videos while class is in session. I know teachers who have high school students who cannot read, and they cannot do anything about it because they cannot confiscate phones and they cannot fail students for doing no coursework and getting zeros on tests. Story 49. I may be old, but this seems like an easy yes. I think they should not be allowed in the classroom, but could be allowed outdoors on school grounds. If it were up to me, high schools could allow them only before or after school hours. Story 50. The high school where I teach, City School on the East Coast of the United States, is in its second year of a full ban on phones during class time. The district provided lock boxes, and students place their phones in them at the classroom door. Occasionally students bring bricked or burner phones to put in the case, but if they are caught using a phone, it is sent to the main office for consequences. Students may carry phones only during hallway transitions between classes. During bathroom breaks, phones must remain in the lockbox. Students may use phones at lunch. This policy has been transformative. I have seen significantly increased student engagement in the classroom. The initial pushback lasted only a few weeks during last year's rollout and has since dissipated. It has become standard practice. Students do not need reminders and slide their phones into the box as they enter the classroom. Do not believe the naysayers. This does improve the classroom learning environment and improves student learning outcomes. Story 51. Yes. I'm always surprised when I'm reminded how pervasive those are in the classroom now. I mean, I expect it, considering where the world has been going and how school administrators do not help teachers enforce rules. But when I was in school, the newest trend was basic liquid crystal display game and watch and Tiger Electronics handhelds. If I was seen with one anywhere except during recess, it was confiscated and my parents had to pick it up. My school banned graphing calculators for a long time because people could put games in them, so we had to use basic scientific calculators. Cell phones would have been unthinkable. Even in college, when early cell phones became more available, we would get kicked out of class if we used one. Now it seems normal. That level of distraction cannot be good. Get off my lawn, maybe, but seeing young ones totally unable to calculate tips without a device at restaurants cracks me up. And 20% is pretty easy. Imagine if they tried to calculate 15%. It is a good thing some restaurants put it on the check. But generally, I think this is just a symptom. Society is having trouble with the core concept of rules. It has reached the point where, aside from murder and maybe rape, and even those in some cases, anything goes and everything is okay. We rely on an honor system because there is virtually no enforcement of many rules, but the social contract underlying that system has collapsed, so it is just chaos. This is just one small piece of it. Story 52. Students in high school and younger should be limited to basic phones only. Smartphones should not be allowed except for documented medical exceptions. This allows phone contact in emergencies, such as medical emergencies or active shooter situations, while preventing most of the distractions caused by smartphones. Story 53. Only someone 12 years old or younger, or someone with the mental capacity of a 12-year-old would not support this. There is no reason for a child to have a cell phone in school. Social media is poison, and cell phones create socially awkward people who live in a bubble. Story 54. My children are in high school and middle school, and overall I'm fine with the bans. I do think they are a little overkill because students are not allowed to use them between classes, during study halls, or at lunch. When the ban was first implemented, one of my son's friends was suspended because he forgot to take off his fitness tracker. It was not even connected to a device, and he was only in 6th grade. That was too much. Story 55. Do kids use cell phones in class? I think they should be required to either leave them in a locker or turn them off during school hours. If parents need to contact a student, they can call the school office. Story 56. Yes. At this age, children are still developing their focus, self-discipline, and social skills. Cell phones can easily distract them from learning. Story 57. I think they should just have flip phones. Yes, they still make them. Story 58. There is no reason for those items in a classroom where you want students to pay attention and absorb the material. The only possible exceptions are audio recording, which the instructor could provide, and automatic translation, which the instructor could also provide. I used a small laptop in college for taking notes because it was faster than writing, but it could be distracting. A smartphone seems like a terrible idea. Story 59. I banned myself from using my phone outside of airplane mode during work hours. My productivity increased. So yes, I agree with a ban. Story 60. Phones should be banned from all grade school classes. The reason is that school is extremely boring. If children had phones, they would not learn anything. I once went to speak to a grade 12 class at the teacher's invitation. 5 students paid attention. The rest were on their phones the entire time. Story 61. What the heck is a cell phone gadget? There is no reason for a child that young to have a cell phone or any related device. Story 62. Ban social media as far as people are willing to go. Social media is a brain-rot experiment launched against children without understanding how it would affect them. It destroys mental health while Mark Zuckerberg makes billions. Fuck him and ban that nonsense. Story 63. I support it because the classroom is not the place to use your phone unless it is part of the lesson. Story 64. I graduated high school in 2010. When I was in school, there was a very firm no cell phones policy. The policy applied to the entire time you were at school, not just during class. If a teacher caught you with a cell phone, they could confiscate it for the whole day. Was that too strict? Absolutely. There is no reason students today should not be allowed to have their phones at lunch and during free periods. But when you are in class, that is your job. You are there to learn, not to doom scroll or share memes. Put the phone down and learn. Story 65. I am a teacher at a school where it is school policy that students may not carry cell phones on campus. It keeps students focused and reduces distractions significantly. Any student caught with a cell phone on campus receives detention, then suspension for repeated offenses. Story 66. I think phones should be banned in classrooms for kindergarten through 12th grade. I don't understand why a 12-year-old or younger needs a phone. What's the point of having one in class? It only serves as a distraction. Story 67. I think the issue is not so much that they will be using WhatsApp or gaming or other activities, but what they could do to the teacher. There are many doxing tools available on a phone. Story 68. Students of all ages and grades should be banned from using TikTok at school. Many already do not know how to function without staring at a screen, and the app also enables cheating. In many jobs, phones must be stored in a locker or a drawer for the entire day. School should train students for the real world. Getting them used to being without TikTok for a few hours each day would help. Story 69. My child still does not have a phone. She is 12 years old and has a smartwatch that can send texts and make calls. She is the only one without a phone in her friend group. I notice many parents immediately get a phone instead of a watch. They say they need to know where their child is and be able to text or call when they need to pick them up. I always say the Apple Watch does the same thing without extra apps. They look at me with confusion. Story 70. I think it makes sense during class, but I do not think it is reasonable to completely ban them at school. Story 71. They may be banned from use, but not from being on a student's person when set to do not disturb or turned off. They are an emergency communication device first and foremost. Story 72. As the parent of an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, I am torn. I do not want devices in my children's hands during class, but I also want them available in case of an emergency. For my 11-year-old cell phone, I would prefer a designated turn-in spot in the classroom where the student must place it at the beginning of class. For my son's global positioning system watch, the only people he can contact are immediate family, and he can only send about 20 pre-made messages. It does not have games. We would make it clear that he should not contact us during the school day except in an absolute emergency. Story 73. Yes. How are they currently being allowed? I assume gadgets are not allowed to be out while class is being taught, so what does banning them actually mean? Will every student have to hand them over when they walk through the door? Story 74. Do some studies? Ask some teachers and analyze the results. We all have opinions, but we do not have to guess. Story 75. Remember before smartphones when accidents at school seemed to happen all the time. For goodness sake, cell phones became common while I was in school, and they were rightly banned from day one. Story 76. Yes, I agree. It hinders learning. So much so that I had friends who just played games on their phones and held me back. However, teachers should allow phones for emergency use. Story 77. I would avoid giving my children smartphones at all if I could do it over. If you want a phone, you get a flip phone. End of story. Story 78. Yes, it reduces distractions and helps children focus on learning. Story 79. Yes, nearly any reason to have one can be solved with a different solution. Story 80. Absolutely. Adults can't even handle what smartphones are doing to us as a freaking species. I'm not exaggerating. Story 81. Yes, because at some point you expect them to be employable. Story 82. I did not get my first cell phone until I was a senior in high school. I got through school just fine. I realized that in today's world children get cell phones much earlier, but they are not needed in the classroom. Our school's rule was that phones remained in students' lockers, and if my parents needed to reach me, I could check my phone between classes. Screen addiction is already a problem, and allowing phones in class would make teaching very difficult. Story 83. I think it should be banned in schools because it is like a toy and distracts children so they do not learn anything. Story 84. Cell phones should be banned through senior year of high school. I am a millennial and received my first phone in 5th grade, but I only used it on field trips and similar occasions. I had a phone in my freshman year of high school, but by that time phones were common, so schools simply banned them. We brought our phones and placed them in our lockers, checking them only during breaks. There is no need to carry them throughout the school day because no subject requires a phone. Students who try to skirt the rules are usually using their phones for activities that are inappropriate in class, such as messaging friends, playing games, or browsing social media. Story 85. They came to school to learn. As an earlier comment said, this should be extended to people aged 18 and under. Story 86. My friend is a high school teacher, and his school just implemented this. He is thrilled and no longer has to fight for it. Story 87. Absolutely not. It should be banned for students aged 1 and older. There is no need for a cell phone in a classroom. Story 88. 12-year-olds should not have cell phones at school. There is no reason for a child to have one. Story 89. No, I'd rather see schools teach digital discipline than pretend phones don't exist. Story 90. Yes, the phone is a distraction and a poor teacher. Story 91. I can't say yes even when I want to, because one of my children uses her phone as part of her medical device. She is diabetic. I need her to have her phone turned on and near her at all times unless her teachers take full responsibility for her health, including checking her blood glucose levels, administering insulin, managing both low and high blood glucose, and handling any other problems that may arise while she is at school. I can't help with anything if she does not have her phone. Story 92. Instead of placing phones in sealed cases, require each person to put their phone in a signal blocking box so that in an emergency they can access it without needing a special method to unlock it. Story 93. My high school had a ban on communication and sound-making devices that was intended to apply to pagers and cell phones. They also tried to apply it to handheld video games. I graduated high school in 2000. I do not understand why this ban is not already in place at most schools, let alone why there is a whole conversation about it. Any such ban can allow for emergency use, so what is the problem? I mean, in classrooms specifically, I do not see an issue with using cell phones at lunch or in the halls between classes. Story 94. I think the only disagreement comes from a handful of parents who are reluctant to speak with the front desk when they need to send a message to their child during the day. Story 95. There is now extensive research showing that excessive screen time and social media are not good for anyone's brain or mental health. It is sound public health policy to minimize the harms of phone use. Story 96. I would ban iPads and Chromebooks in schools for students below 9th grade. There is no reason any of these children need to learn mathematics and reading on a screen while their brains are developing unless they have special educational needs. Not to mention access to messaging and artificial intelligence, which enables cheating and reduces attention and academic honesty. Technology in schools has not helped education as a whole. Basic literacy has declined. Mathematics literacy has declined significantly. Computer science skills have also declined. Story 97. I think screens should not be allowed in classrooms, except for the teacher's computer used for projection. This should apply to all grade levels, not just kindergarten through 12th grade. Story 98. I agree with school-wide phone bans. School is for learning, not for pretending to learn or bullying others. Story 99. God, am I glad I grew up before this became a widespread problem. Back then, if you had data, the other kids treated you like a god. Story 100. If bans are not possible, solutions can be employed to restrict their use to basic functions during school hours. Story 101. I am not sure whether it is considered a ban, but all students must turn in their phones at the start of a lesson and may take them back at the end unless they need them for medical reasons or similar. Banning phones inside the classroom is reasonable. Allow students to carry their phones in the halls. Story 102. My tween doesn't have a phone, so it doesn't matter to me. Story 103. When I was a kid, we got phones, but what you could do with them was very limited. Making calls and sending texts was it for most of my school years. It was not until after high school, around college, that phones became much more advanced and social media really took off. Now you will see students playing full-blown games like Fortnite and Call of Duty in class. Watching videos and even explicit content is not unheard of. Social media runs all day and teachers have no effective way to stop it without a cell phone ban, so I understand that. If there is a reasonable system that allows students to access their phones quickly in an emergency, I would support it. Story 104. I think their use should be banned in classrooms from kindergarten through high school, unless the teacher specifically requires them for the lesson being taught. Students are in class to learn. They can wait until between classes or during breaks to use their phones. Story 105. Children should be required to have a license and meet age restrictions to use a phone. If children need constant communication for safety reasons, that should be addressed with hardware. Phones should be designed for children with basic communication and a global positioning system, and children should be allowed to keep them on their person while in school. Story 106. No children need cell phones when school is in session. This applies to all ages, not just those under 12. Story 107. They were banned when I was in high school in the 2010s. Why are people acting like this is a new thing? Story 108. Normally I'd say yes, but with so many shootings, no. Let them have them in case they need them. Put them in lockboxes inside the classroom. Story 109. I am a teacher, and my state banned phones and smartwatches in schools this year. I am so happy about it. Parents are learning, but the biggest problem is their jobs. Employers have no boundaries and constantly text, then get upset when students do not reply. Story 110. Let them keep the devices, but have them place them on the desk, face down. Story 111. They are there to learn. You don't need your phone when a person with the knowledge is right in front of you. Story 112. As long as children are commonly shot in school shootings, I would not support the ban. In other countries where school shootings are virtually unknown, I would support the ban. Story 113. Yes. Social media is a major distraction in learning environments, and having a camera with you at all times encourages inappropriate behavior. Children need to socialize without their phones. Story 114. I read a story about a school that even banned them during lunch. The school added games in the cafeteria, board games, arcade games, and physical games such as cornhole. Lunch became fun again. Story 115. I think it is okay to put them in a holder until class is over, as long as they are accessible in emergencies. Story 116. Children age 12 and under do not need cell phones in class. Hallways and lunchtime are fine. They should not be used in the classroom. Story 117. The only reason I like my daughter having one is that pickup times can vary depending on my work schedule. and it is helpful if I can let her know when I will pick her up. However, she could simply check at the end of the day, or the school could provide a better way to inform parents of pickup times. Story 118. My son just got his first phone. He is 16 and is becoming more social and independent outside the house. His phone is locked up at school. Kids shouldn't have phones until they get their driver's license. Story 119. I'm a millennial and I didn't grow up with a cell phone in middle school. The phones we had in high school were not even smartphones yet. Those kids will be fine without them. Story 120. I say ban cell phones in all classrooms. You are there to learn, not to use TikTok. Story 121. I am a teacher at a school that banned personal mobile devices. This year is going better than usual. I am 2 weeks ahead of my usual curriculum delivery schedule. We are covering material faster, students are more focused, and work completion is higher. There are still students who put their heads on the desk, goof off, or avoid work, but overall it is a massive improvement. Districts should implement this as a blanket policy everywhere. Story 122. I do not believe that anyone 12 years old or younger should have a phone. Story 123. The only reason I can see for a student to keep their phone in class is if they use a wearable glucose monitor, in which case the phone would be considered a medical device. I am not saying there is no potential for abuse, but the benefit far outweighs the risk in this situation. Story 124. Fuck yeah. The internet killed society, and I'm a millennial who saw it happen. Story 125. Why should students older than 12 have phones in the classroom? Story 126. As someone who recently graduated from school, I agree. If a student has finished all their work and has free time, they should be able to do anything reasonable that does not distract others, including using their phone. During lessons or work time, phones should at a minimum be stored in backpacks because having them on your person is distracting. A text can wait until the passing period, and in an emergency someone can call the school office. Story 127. If they can't figure out how to keep guns out of the classroom, then the kids should be able to call for help. Story 128. Hello, a teacher here. I agree with this and would restrict phones to 16 years and younger. Phones, social media, and the internet are addictive. If you have trouble not picking up your phone first thing in the morning, imagine what it is like for a child or teenager whose brain is still developing. It is an awful thing that we are allowing to happen. They interrupt classes, and from experience I can say the benefits are minimal. Even if you plan a lesson around browsing Wikipedia or other information sources, students will just switch to TikTok when you are not watching. Bullying has moved from school hallways to the digital realm. The harassment does not stop when the bell rings. It continues when students get home. Kids can be extremely vicious about it. For those interested, I recommend the book The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Do not get me started on how teens use artificial intelligence. It is alarming. Story 129. Yes, it should apply to anyone in school regardless of age. Story 130. Children in Oklahoma should be allowed to have cell phones so they can fact-check what is being taught. Story 131. We are making children dependent on constant dopamine stimulation. There has to be some intervention. I work with young children, so it is not a problem on my end, but I have heard from high school teachers that their students have almost no capacity to focus and no tolerance for boredom. This is not normal. Story 132. Sure, I do not want to watch 12-year-olds dancing to Baby Shark on social media. Story 133. Realistically, it has already been banned for years. Do what has always been done. Punish those who break the rule. It is virtue signaling by districts. Story 134. Cell phones should not be used in the classroom. If people argue they should be allowed, create an app that locks the phone but allows a digital hall pass. The app would provide location tracking for the school and parents throughout the day, similar to Life 360. It should restrict messaging so students can only contact a parent and block all other access. I guarantee that once this is implemented, students will stop using their phones in class. Story 135. They should not have a cell phone at that age at all. It is completely insane that people give young children phones and access to the internet. I am only 23 and can see this is a horrible idea. What the fuck are the real adults doing in order to believe this was ever okay in the first place? The only thing a child would need a phone for is to contact a parent. Surely we could have made a device like a pager that only allows calls and text messages, nothing else, no camera, no apps. Full phone and internet access without supervision should only be allowed after about age 15. Story 136. I am not even that old, 26, and I remember surviving high school without needing my phone. Laughing out loud. Story 137. I agree that students should not have their phones out during class, but there is nothing wrong with having them in their backpacks or lockers. Story 138. I did not have a strong opinion either way before they implemented the ban in our district. It is a state law now. Teachers are reporting only positive outcomes. Student attention has increased and grades are improving. The ban is working, but some parents are still upset about it. Tell them to take it up with their representative. Story 139. No, I disagree. I do not even have children, but if something unsafe happens, a child needs to be able to reach their parents. If I have children and this becomes common, I will give them at least a burner phone. Story 140. When I was a teenager, pagers were banned. There was no reason for students to have a phone and be connected to the outside world. They should be there to learn, not spending all day on Facebook, YouTube, or whatever they are watching. Story 141. I cannot see any reason for a child in class to have a phone on them. Story 142. I understand the concept, but as someone who had severe asthma, I did not know when it would flare up. Once or twice the school nurse tried to send me back, and without a way to let my mother know, it could have become serious. Story 143. Concentrating in class was very difficult before we had small devices that are essentially black holes for attention spans. Story 144. Local high school requires students to place phones in lockers throughout the day. I spoke to a few students recently, and they do not mind because no one else has their phones out. Ironically, there has been more trouble in the halls and restrooms as students revert to old-school behavior. Story 145. Give me one good reason a student needs a phone in the classroom? I cannot think of a single reason. My children do not need phones in class. With the rise of cyberbullying, there should be restrictions on phone use whenever possible while at school. Story 146. Mobile phone use should be allowed in schools, with parents and teachers enforcing responsible use. I do not think students should spend entire class periods on their phones playing games like Candy Crush or browsing TikTok. Having instant access to information, apps that increase productivity, and communication are all positive. It is not entirely the students' fault if they use phones for games and social media. Those platforms were developed and popularized by Generation X and older millennials. Baby boomers expressed similar concerns about iMac G3 computers when I was in school. A phone is a tool. Learn to use it properly and it becomes a life skill. Story 147. Children 12 and under do not need to have a smartphone on them all the time. Our children have friends who receive smartphones and are glued to the phones. Every spare second they watch short videos and there is constant noise. It is obvious that many commenters do not spend time around children or in schools and therefore do not see this behavior. Story 148. Place all phones in a bucket. If a phone rings, the teacher checks whether the caller is a family member, and if so, the student may answer. Pause the entire class briefly to encourage a quick response. Provide calculators if needed. Story 149. Why do children under 12 need a phone in class anyway? You cannot expect them to have the common courtesy to turn off their phones as they are a distraction. Story 150. If I had had a phone like this when I was a kid, I could tell you how much time would have been spent playing games versus learning 100% to 0%. So yeah, though not everyone was as much of a dumbfuck as I was. Story 151. Yes. My children did not get a cell phone until they were old enough to buy one and pay for the plan. They survived just fine. If you feel you must be able to contact a child at all times, which describes a child 12 years old or younger, find alternative means to do so. Children need to learn to function without that leash. Story 152. I think it is simple. Have students drop their phones in a bin when they walk into class? Story 153. Yes, they should not have anything other than a flip phone at that age. Story 154. Game Boys were banned when we were kids. Banning similar distracting devices, which are essentially small computers, seems reasonable. Story 155. I was surprised it was not considered normal for students to be prohibited from having cell phones in the classroom. How is a teacher supposed to teach with students' attention on cell phones? Story 156. I think mobile phones should be on airplane mode with no wireless internet unless it is break or lunchtime. Honestly, even then, just a few minutes to check messages, and then off again. I have to admit that having a phone when I was in school would have made my life so much easier. I would not have felt so alone. My online friends were great. I am still friends with one of them more than 20 years later. I would have been able to search for answers when my teacher refused to help me and a couple of other students during math class. That was very frustrating. I was sent out of class so many times for turning around and talking. I was simply asking the student behind me for help after the teacher told me to just figure it out and said I should know it. 5 other students and I had been placed in the wrong set the previous year and had not been taught the higher level math. Our school was a mess. 2 schools had merged and students had been placed into the wrong sets. It was not our fault. We told the teacher and she still refused to help us. Story 157. They should go further. Phones should be banned in school classrooms at all grade levels. Story 158. During class, mobile phones should be absolutely silenced or turned off. Otherwise, they are nearly impossible to control unless all mobile phone signals are blocked. Story 159. I absolutely love the cell phone ban in schools. My students are much more engaged with learning and with each other than they have been in years. Story 160. In my opinion, cell phones should be turned over in class unless a parent or guardian has provided handwritten permission explaining why their child should have access. Students should be opted out by default and may opt in only with such permission. Story 161. I think they should be banned in schools, teachers included. You are there to either teach or learn. There is no reason to need a phone while at work or school. I am sure the school has a landline in case of emergency. Story 162. Obviously, students should not use their phones in class, but there is no need for state or county law to enforce this. School districts and even individual schools and teachers should have flexibility in how they prevent students from using phones in class, depending on their particular circumstances. Story 163. Yes, it made sense when I was a kid in school. The distractions are even worse now. Story 164. I totally agree that they should be put away during class, but banning students from having phones at all is going too far. 1. Gun violence is the #1 cause of death for children, and it is only getting worse. Being age 12 and under does not spare them. School shootings are horrible, terrifying, and confusing events for adults and children alike. Children need a way to contact their parents during an emergency. 2. Mass punishments cause bad behavior. They do nothing to deter troublemakers from continuing to break the rules. They did not care before and will not care now. Instead, mass punishments teach well-behaved students that their behavior does not matter. If Susie spends her school day being attentive, following directions, maintaining straight grades, and only using her phone during passing periods, but she receives the same consequences as Tammy, who always slacks off, has terrible grades, and is always using her phone in class, what motivation does Susie have to keep behaving? Remember, she is 8, so college is not a motivator yet. Story 165. While I do not think it is advisable, I can see value in schools teaching how to use reliable resources. 4th and 5th graders do not usually write essays that require research and citation. At that developmental stage, social interaction and hands-on engagement are more important. Story 166. As an older man, I asked whether it is okay for schools to ban phones for children. Why are we using the ing form? Phones have been banned since my father's era. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.